are we attracted to men or are we just attracted to their validation?
My attraction to men was never my own idea.
Sex is for men and it's for their pleasure and it ends when they end because of comp-het and all these norms.
What is a man? Like, what does that mean? A lot of the hyper masculine lesbians also follow that traditionalist view of who is the man in the relationship and who is the woman in the relationship. That is kind of giving like traditional heteronormative gender roles.
Yeah.
Being a lesbian doesn't mean that you have to be a woman. The term is fluid.
Ooh, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Queer Collective podcast. I'm your host, Carbon.
I'm Emily.
And I'm Tyra.
And welcome to the show. And this episode is presented by Vizzy Hard Seltzer and Field, but more on that later.
Is compulsory heterosexuality limiting your love life? Today's society raises us to believe that everyone around us is heterosexual or cisgender until proven otherwise. And even for us queer folks, this deeply entrenched belief can follow us into our relationships well after coming out. On today's episode, we're diving into compulsory heterosexuality and how to create a more fulfilling relationship beyond the binary. Alongside today's guest, we'll explore questioning your gender and sexuality, how societal expectations impact queer dating, and equip you with tools to start deprogramming your own comp-het.
And with us today, we have Tyra Blizzard, who is a passionate content creator, author, and community builder. On top of that, they're also a professional basketball player. Ball is life. Tyra is the author of a prompt-based gender and sexuality journal to help people unlearn societal expectations and navigate comp-het. And that is why we thought that they would be the perfect guest for today's episode. So thank you, Tyra, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
For our first bit, we're going to be diving into questioning your own gender, sexuality, and the impact of comp-het. So starting from ground zero, would you be able to explain to us what compulsory heterosexuality is?
So simply put, it's just mandatory straightness. That is the easy way to kind of explain it. It's this theory that everyone is expected to be heterosexual. Heterosexual is the default, and we all have to follow all the rules and standards that are associated with that.
So one thing that I've definitely noticed has gone more popular on TikTok has been a lot of people questioning, am I just a lesbian or is it comp-het? And I'm wondering if you could share some signs to tell if you're not actually attracted to the opposite sex and if you're just experiencing comp-het.
Well, first, I think for me, it was helpful to kind of write out my type in my straight days.
Yeah.
I'm using air quotes for those who
In
are
my
listening.
straight days.
In my hetero days, my type was like very stereotypical, tall, muscular athlete, like what you see on TV, like who you're supposed to be attracted to. The first question in my journal is like, what's your type? What kind of man or what kind of woman are you attracted to? So having that written out and recognizing if you're typically attracted to people who are unattainable, like fictional characters or like a teacher or, you know, someone unattainable. If you find yourself crushing on people and then the moment they like you back, all of a sudden you're like, I'm not interested. Or even when it comes to sex and intimacy, if you find that you're typically engaging when you're not sober, and then when you are sober, you're like, I don't think I can do this. If you feel you've never actually really had an emotional connection to the people you're interacting with, that isn't necessarily a result of comp-het, but those are kind of like the baseline that I kind of think about. And those are the things that I thought of first when I was unpacking my sexuality.
I think I relate to all of it because I was definitely only attracted to like the most polished, the most put together, the prettiest version of a man, like muscular and like all these different things. Also, I wasn't like that invested. I only had one relationship. Looking back on it, I wasn't that invested. At the time, I was like, this is what investment looks like. Whenever he would be like talking about the future together, I'd be like, it doesn't sound that great.
Yeah.
Or like, can we talk about it later? Have you had any experiences like that?
It's interesting because I am bisexual. The past 7 years, I was identifying as a lesbian and I've just like kind of unpacked a lot of internalized biphobia to like get to this place. I definitely have like a strong preference towards being with women and like building a life and like bigger relationships with women too. So there's like a lot of unpacking there, I guess. I'm still unpacking. I definitely find I've never been super anxiously attached to any man I've dated, which is really interesting. They've all been anxiously attached to me, but in my relationships with women, I'm like a super anxiously attached person. And I'm like, what's that about? I think there's definitely ways that everyone is impacted by comp-het. Just because you're impacted by it doesn't mean that you necessarily are fully gay or a lesbian.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes. Even me realizing that I'm demisexual also played a huge part in it in terms of not feeling an emotional connection to the men I was interacting with. But that came later in the journey. But initially I was like, oh, well, if I'm not emotionally connected to any of these men, then I must not be into them. And it's like, okay, it's actually actually deeper than that because that kind of applies to everyone. So I totally resonate with both of your experiences.
What was your own journey of self-discovery and like specifically how you felt you were impacted by comp-het along the way?
I love telling the story because it's just, it happened within literally like a year. Like it happened all at the same time during COVID, like 2020, because I had nothing to do.
We did a lot of recruiting during COVID.
No. Literally though, like I know there's so many people who totally resonate with the whole COVID situation because we had nothing to do but just sit with our thoughts and feelings. For me, it was the first time ever that basketball just couldn't be a thing, which is part of the reason why I never really had time to explore myself, because it's like when we have practice, like what time do we have to think about our gender and sexuality? I was also on TikTok and that was like a newer thing. So I was seeing people that I had just never seen before outside of my little bubble and realizing that I was attracted to more than one type of person. So I initially was like, okay, I think I'm pan. And I went to pan because I didn't think that there was no way I was attracted to men because I was always, in my mind, quote unquote, attracted to them. So I was like, okay, well, they're 100% part of my dating pool, but now I'm realizing that there's other people involved. So I was like pan for a bit, I thought. As I was exploring what that meant, I was kind of toying between the difference between bisexual and pansexual of like which label fits me the best. Like what is the difference between them? I'm trying to figure that out.
I think we all are sometimes.
I think they really like people use it back and forth like interchangeably a lot.
The reason I went pan was because I was like, oh, well, I need to include non-binary people in my dating pool. But then I was like, well, in doing that, I'm almost associating a gender to non-binariness, which is like, it totally defeats the purpose. So I was like, okay, I'm confused. I need to have an understanding of like, what is gender before I figure out what label works best for me. And that's kind of what started the whole spiral of like gender sexuality crisis.
Which ways do you feel like comp-het kind of limited things, but also like what were your realizations that were associated to it?
When I first started looking for women to date, they were the most masculine of masculine that you could ever find. Like I was like on one end of the spectrum entirely because I was trying to find the closest thing to what I was taught that I was supposed to be attracted to, which was like masculinity. So I'm like, okay, I might not be into just men, but I'm like, okay, I'm attracted to women, but they have to be like super masculine because that's what I'm used to. I realized that that wasn't really my vibe. I started kind of separating the gender from masculinity and femininity and kind of trying to analyze what those meant. And then that was a whole other rabbit hole of understanding what masculinity is and what femininity is.
Yeah.
And I just remembered some of the things I had studied in university in my sociology classes, one of them being the Bem Sexual Inventory by Sandra Bem, a social psychologist who had put together this breakdown of characteristics associated with masculinity and femininity and measuring them against each other, essentially. I was reading this list of masculine and feminine traits and it drove me insane. Like I was so upset reading that feminine traits are things like being soft, gentle, childlike. I was like hardened,
Creepy.
Cooperative. And then the masculine traits were like strong and independent and like all of those like really positive traits. And I was like, why is it that if I am being categorized as a woman, I have to have these specific traits and then I'm supposed to be attracted to people who have these quote unquote opposite traits when I feel like all of us have a combination of everything. So that again started like a whole other type of rabbit whole situation of me being confused about gender, sexuality in general, but it all stemmed from this comp-het situation of me recognizing that my attraction to men was never my own idea. It was just everything that I've seen in every movie, every book, even my parents, like the guys I dated in university were literally just whoever I could find that was the closest to my dad because he played football, my mom played basketball, so I was playing basketball and I was like, I need to find a football player, and I dated literally exclusively football players. I realized that I was like, okay, this is me just trying to follow a script rather than what I actually want.
So much of it is the media that we consume as well. It's like all of the Disney films showing these types of like love stories. It does make you, even as like a young child, feel this like longing for that, even when you're not actually wanting that. And it becomes hard to separate your own desires from what's kind of been like programmed into your mind.
Do you think that with these like super ultra masculine lesbians, are they perhaps, in your opinion, still following this idea of comp-het and being like, okay, I am a woman who likes women. I am a little bit more masculine. Therefore, I have to like present super masculine because I am the man of the relationship.
You're gonna get me in trouble.
Where's my PR team?
Say the controversial shit.
From what I've witnessed, a lot of the hyper masculine lesbians also follow that traditionalist view of like who is the man in the relationship and who is the woman in the relationship, who's the masculine, who's the feminine, and then being like, okay, well, I'm the masculine, so I have to pay for everything. I have to go out and work. I have to keep my emotions bottled up. Things like that, where it's like, as a woman, again, I'm using quotations when I say woman, and we'll get into that later. But as a woman, you are socialized in a way that like allows you to be emotionally expressive. Like that's what's expected of us. So it's like to go against that and to go against the way that you were socialized to now hold in your emotions because like that is the quote unquote masculine thing to do. That is kind of giving like traditional heteronormative gender roles. Yeah. Again, this is not for all super masculine lesbians. It's just what I've seen more often than not. Ones who are a little bit more fluid, I find in literally interacting with them, there's more of a fluid view of queerness, of relationships, of lesbianism. This is not everyone. This is not all the time. Again, on like the hyper masculine side, it's like, did you choose that? Is that what you want for yourself? Or is that what you think you're supposed to be? Who knows?
Well, I feel like we saw that represented in Ultimatum, the queer edition, the lesbian edition. It was so comp-het, starting from the way that they dress and like the way that they play into like binary gender roles, but even just the idea of marriage and having it like it has to be a thing that we have to follow is, I think, also part of the comp-het agenda.
I also feel it's somewhat of a form of self-preservation as well. If you look in towards like queer movements, a lot of like gay and lesbian couples, especially like white people, would try to like fit into the norm and be like, I can still be part of this. And then it's kind of an othering of a lot of people who cannot conform into that. One interesting piece around comp-het that I found really brought something up for me was, are we attracted to men? Or are we just attracted to their validation? And I'm wondering like if it can be varying degrees of both too. And what your thoughts are there.
I definitely think that it's both. And then again, this is for people who feel as though comp-het applies to them, obviously. I think personally, me being demi made things a little bit more complicated. And for those who don't know, demisexual for me means that I need an emotional connection to someone to even start to feel any kind of like sexual attraction or romantic attraction. So that created some confusion for me. I think also because I was going for the stereotypical, like this is the guy you're supposed to date. And there was a lot of social capital associated to that, being like, okay, if you're dating the most attractive or the most athletic guy, I felt like it almost validated my femininity in a sense to be with a guy that was like traditional, like this is what you're supposed to be. And the validation that I got from that was very much a driving force for me because it was just like a cycle of like, okay, you're validating me, you're telling me that I'm feminine enough and that I'm woman enough and I'm doing the thing right. Like I'm getting an A+ on the test. And I mean, like I have a little bit of a praise kink. So like I like getting good grades. I like doing things well. And I felt like I was performing straightness properly when I was dating those types of men. And I feel like for a lot of us, that is what we long for. Because again, that's what we see in the media all the time is like when you get the compliment or the stare from the Troy Bolton of the school, you're just like, you melt inside and there's butterflies and you're like, that's what I've been wanting is like the acknowledgement and the validation from this man. When it comes from anyone else, like when your friends are complimenting you, it doesn't hit the same as when it's like the guy you have a crush on.
Yeah. But I feel like also if you get a compliment or praise or just like validation from the Troy Bolton of the school, everybody else notices. And that's more validation and that's more eyes on you and more praise and everything else. So you're not just getting it from one person, you're getting it from like everybody that's seeing it too.
The strange thing for me is like I find that getting hit on by women, it still hits the same for me. Like that still like hits my validation as well.
It hits.
I just like never really experienced that growing up because of comp-het. Like you're mainly just being hit on by men. You know what I mean? And like men are so trained to like catcall and do these kinds of things where it's like they're going out of their way. And even though it feels objectifying and it never really feels that great, it can feel validating in some way. It's like, oh, like I've gotten catcalled 3 times today, must look good, even though it feels kind of scary too.
It's so superficial as well because like you said with the catcalling, like oftentimes men when they're giving these quote unquote compliments, it's about just pure physical appearance, body parts, like pure objectification. But then when compliments happen from women, a lot of times sometimes it's like so specific and it's like, oh, you were really paying attention. There's definitely a difference there. But I guess when we're used to just accepting scraps from men, as soon as we get a little something, we're like, oh yes, like this is what I've been wanting, when it's like, really, you didn't want that at all. We're just taught that we're supposed to want it.
This next part might make people mad, and I hope your PR is ready. In your TikTok Gender Crisis series, you explain that the reason you're not attracted to men is not because they're men. It's because of the ways that they're socialized. And I'm wondering if you can unpack that for us.
What is a man? Like, what does that mean? Because I've met different types of men that seem from two totally different worlds. Again, it is the way that men are typically socialized that I find I'm not attracted to, the traditional way, you know, feeling like they need to be the head of the household and they take up all the space in the room, and just the way they're kind of taught to more so focus inward on themselves, and because they're supposed to be the breadwinner and independent and whatever, so they're more so focused on like success in the workforce rather than community and whatever. Again, this isn't something that all men exhibit, but it is the way that they're kind of taught. The way that they're taught masculinity, I'll say, is just unattractive to me. It's very rigid. These are the rules and this is how I'm supposed to be. Anything that is remotely feminine, they're just like have such an aversion to. And I just find that lack of fluidity unattractive. It's really just that. It's like they're like, this is my box and nothing else is allowed to be inside or outside of this box. Like, this is how it is. And I just don't like the boxes.
It's so stiff and rigid.
Stiff and rigid. That's
how
what
am
it
I supposed to be comfy in here?
Exactly.
Would you or have you ever been attracted to like a queer man though?
Yes. Yeah. That's why when it comes to the lesbian label, recently I've kind of almost stepped away from it. This is like not a fully formed thought. I still don't really understand where I'm at with it. I just use queer now. I just feel like there's like an inherent femme connotation associated with lesbian. Not always, not for everyone, just for me. For some reason, I haven't been able to detach it for myself. That's why I was like, the lesbian label was confusing to me, because I was like, queer men though, like the ones who have this like perfect combination of masculine and feminine energies. Yeah. I don't know. I feel this almost, not this, I don't want to say the same level of attraction that I do to more femme presenting people or just femmes in general, but there's definitely physical attraction there. And I'm like, it's more me being attracted to the idea and like what I see from them that shows me that they have an understanding that life is fluid and they can be fluid. That's really what I'm attracted to. Even when it comes to women, like I'm more attracted to people who are kind of more in the middle and give off
androgyny.
Not even androgyny. Like you can look hyper masc, but give off a feminine energy. And I just love the duality of it. Yeah. And that applies to anybody.
Yeah. Like you're a twink.
Yeah. I can relate to that. I don't think that I'm attracted to men sexually, but I can definitely recognize when somebody's very attractive. And typically when I recognize and it's like, it strikes me, it's when they're super comfortable in their femininity. That extends to not just queer men, but also straight men that are very comfortable with their femininity and masculinity. I've seen super straight men on TikTok or Instagram or whatever wearing makeup and like doing their nails and wearing crop tops. They just don't care. And then that to me is like so attractive.
Can I ask, do you think that's a type or a sexual preference?
In terms of being attracted to queer men or like men in general?
The same thing goes for me. We're poly. I have another partner that's a man, but is like a very queer man that's also like has like a very feminine side and has like done a lot of unpacking too. I went on dates with other men before having met him and it was just like not hitting. It was like a one and done, like, no, thank you, bye, next. You know what I mean? And I do feel confident in either like the pan or bi label because I'm like, I'm definitely not going to like every single man, but I am attracted to masculine bodies. Like I'm attracted to their bodies, but that's like my type in a man. You know what I mean?
Yeah, this is something I'm still unpacking it. The label of like man, woman is still something that I'm like, what does it even mean? And what does that mean for me and my sexuality? Because my sexuality is dependent on my gender and the gender of the people I'm attracted to, if we're going labels. And that's why I say that gender and sexuality should be explored together. If me being quote unquote back in the day cisgender heterosexual woman, or what I thought I was, what made me heterosexual was me being a woman being attracted to men. If I realize later down the line I'm a trans man and I'm still attracted to men, now by definition my label is homosexual. Gender and sexuality, like they depend on each other essentially. So that's why when it comes to my attraction toward queer men, there's a physical attraction, sometimes there's even a sexual attraction, but because I'm demi, again, like I need an emotional connection for me to even think anything further than just acknowledging that they're attractive and then keeping it pushing.
Where you currently stand, in your opinion, what is a man? What is a woman?
Truly, I don't think there is an answer to that question. I think it is such an individual thing. I think there is a traditional definition of what those things are. But when I started unpacking for myself and I was like, okay, well, when I first came out as pan, and then I was like, oh, actually, I think I'm a lesbian. I'm like, okay, I am confident in the fact that I'm a woman who's attracted to women. And then I was like, okay, but like, what is a woman though? Like, let me just make sure that I have it all figured out. So then I researched it. And again, I found, even if we're talking biologically, it still doesn't make sense that it's like, if you have XX chromosomes, that makes you this. If you have XY, that makes you that. And then that's it. There are people who exist outside of those two options. So even biologically, we cannot say that your chromosomes determine what your gender is. Like they're two totally different sciences, biology and sociology. I was like, okay, it has nothing to do with biology then if we're talking about what is a man. What about the social aspect of it? And then you talk about the characteristics that we're looking up, like, okay, someone who's independent, strong, masculine, whatever. And then again, still that doesn't apply to solely men, because anybody can have those traits. So then I was like, okay, well, what is something about men that is specific and unique to men that makes them men? Because it's not body parts, it's not characteristics. Literally, like, what is it? It's just an individual feeling of like, okay, I just feel like this is something that applies to me. But I think a lot of people have just never had the privilege to even think or question it, or never felt like they could question it because the rules are so rigid, especially for men.
The interesting thing is like what a man and what a woman is actually completely made up. The idea that we can make up what it means to ourselves, I think, is totally valid. Interestingly, like, I've been exploring my gender a lot lately and like feeling like maybe non-binary is for me, but sometimes I still feel like a woman. You know what I mean? Like randomly, like some days I'm just like, I'm a fucking woman today. And then like other days I'm like an inanimate object. Like, I don't know. I'm not sure. Like, I don't feel like I'm anything some days. And not in a weird way. Like, I just don't feel like I fit into any of it, and all of it just feels like a bit like, ugh.
I feel like both. For example, I wouldn't like the pronouns he, him. I would be good with she or they. But I like other forms of like masc words. Like if somebody was like sweet boy or
little sir.
You think you're both in terms of being man and woman. For me, I just separate that further into masculine and feminine, and having that duality makes so much sense of like having both. Like, I think all of us have varying degrees of both, and feeling like you have to be one thing or the other thing can feel so restricting.
100%.
That's why I am gender queer, because when I found out about the term, I was like, okay, this makes so much more sense, because I don't have to say that I'm one thing or the other thing. I like all pronouns also. Like, some days I'm feeling more he, him. Sometimes it's more they, she. Oftentimes I don't have a lot of control over it, because however people perceive me is how they're going to perceive me. Oftentimes it's giving she, her. It is what it is. Like, other people's perceptions, it doesn't impact how I feel about myself. But I totally understand like wanting different, you know, more masculine terms like handsome and like sweet boy, like those things, versus like feminine terms to be used so that you don't feel like you're just like in one box.
Yeah.
Because you're not.
Exactly. You've spoken about how yourself and your partner's exploration on both your genders has really called your lesbian identity into question. And I'm just wondering, why does genderqueer lesbian make sense for you? And what does that mean?
Yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't. It did like a couple months ago.
Yeah.
Now it doesn't. It feels contradictory. And again, that's just for me. Because for the longest time, I was like, well, being a lesbian doesn't mean that you have to be a woman. Like that, the term is fluid. But I was trying to teach myself that the term is fluid. And I wasn't fully believing it, because my whole entire life, lesbian was associated with women. That's what I knew for so long. And I'm still trying to fight it and break it down. It was Lesbian Visibility Month the other month. And someone in my team at work was like, oh, happy Lesbian Visibility Month. And I was like, I feel like
where's
this isn't
HR?
me. I felt like I was like kind of a fraud. I was like, this doesn't apply to me though, because like I don't feel that.
Also, the whole bit about like lesbian doesn't have to mean that you're a woman. That part, some people would fight you in the comments.
I know. Oh, people are gonna be so mad at me. I know.
I just watched a whole Jubilee video, and it was like conservative lesbians versus like leftist lesbians, and that was like one of the hugest points of contention was, can non-binary genderqueer people still be included in the lesbian umbrella? Conservatives obviously were saying no. Leftists were saying yes. And in my opinion, I think like labels are very personal to people, and I think they evolve and change, and like sometimes it like doesn't actually feel right for you, and then you're like, oops, maybe am I proving you right? I don't know. I did the same thing. Like I was like, I feel like I'm a bisexual lesbian, and like so many people got really pissed in the comments, and I'm like, honestly, you might have been kind of right. Like I don't actually feel that anymore, but it was part of my journey.
That's the thing. I feel like people get upset, and I've noticed this also with, the content that I've created in the comments, same exact deal.
Yeah.
People get upset because they have their own definition.
Yes.
And they have been like, okay, well, my definition of lesbian is this. So if you're saying that you have a different definition, then that makes me wrong. So you must be wrong.
Right.
And now I'm going to make sure that I'm going to change your mind because I don't want to be wrong. Instead of acknowledging that it's fluid, the word, the terms, like all of these labels, yes, there are definitions to help people understand them, but all words evolve. Like we all made up these words and they can mean so many different things to so many different people.
Oh no, it's very rigid according to them. It means only one thing.
Only one thing for everyone.
For everybody, baseline.
The thing that I struggle with is to some degrees, I can agree. It's like there's definitions and definitions do mean things. You know what I mean? Like words kind of in our society, words have to mean certain things. I think one thing that people in the comments don't understand who are like fighting this is that a lot of the time queer people use labels as a means to explore their identity and like it's like kind of trying something on. Like sometimes you're like shifting it and trying to like make it fit and then you're like, no, that doesn't actually fit me. The question is, do we make something new or do we just keep like expanding what is already existing?
My opinion is you can use whatever label you want at any time, any day.
Yeah.
And it doesn't actually matter if you fit somebody else's definition of that label or not. I think a lot of people get mad because for some reason they think that it calls their identity into question. It's like if I use the term lesbian, but maybe like I'm trans or maybe I'm non-binary or maybe I have sex with one guy a year, then it's like, no, but you can't because I don't do that. And I identify as that. In the grand scheme of things, like it actually doesn't matter. Is that stopping you from like attaining a partner? Like, is that stopping you from like how you live your life? So it's like, what does it matter?
I think it also has to do with community and people feeling like, for example, if we want to go to like a lesbian bar and they want to make sure that everyone in the lesbian bar is a lesbian. So if you were walking in and everyone has a different definition of that, then they're like, well, how do we designate safe spaces? And at the end of the day, like we all have so many different intersecting identities that are going to impact how we see ourselves and how we see our labels and terms. And also like, I think that's why we have so many different like micro labels because we're trying to figure out exactly what fits for each specific person. Because as you mentioned, like the lesbian label can mean one thing or it can mean a lot of different things. And it just depends on how, I don't want to say rigid because I understand the validity and wanting there to be consistency in specific labels, especially when there's so much history behind the word lesbian. I think that's why people get really passionate about it. But it also just kind of goes back to the idea of boxes. And I think that's what bothered me when I first came out as a lesbian. I thought I was going to be welcomed with open arms and I was not at all because I had only ever been with men. I was told straight up by my ex that I was dating at the time because I was like, I actually think I'm a lesbian. Like, I don't think I'm pan. And they were like, no, this is just a phase. Like, it's just because you're dating me. And I was like, okay. So then I brought it to my TikTok and I was like, what do you guys think about this? And they were like, the whole gold star lesbian thing. Like, you've only been with men. So how can you be a lesbian? Like, this doesn't make sense. And you haven't had enough lesbian experience and haven't checked off enough boxes to be like a real lesbian. And I'm like, how are we supposed to explore ourselves if I don't even feel comfortable in the space that took me so long to get to in the first place?
I mean, I think that's a mix of people being very like protective over their own identities and like communities. And I think a little bit of like biphobia sprinkled in there a bit too.
A lot of it.
A
lot of it.
Hold that thought because this podcast is proudly sponsored by Vizzy Hard Seltzer.
That's right. And the ones that we were drinking in this episode is from their new launch, which is Vizzy Hard Seltzer Max, now with 7% alcohol. And they have vibrant new flavors like papaya pineapple, dragon fruit mango, blueberry white peach, and passion fruit kiwi.
Love it. And they all taste super good. And as always, we recommend if you are a hard seltzer drinker that you support a brand that also supports the queer community. These past 7 months, we've been having a really incredible time exploring ethical non-monogamy in our own relationship because we're dating.
And a huge catalyst for this change has genuinely been exploring things on Field. For those of you who don't know, Field is a dating app geared towards polyamory, ethical non-monogamy, and kink.
If this sounds like something you're interested in exploring, we definitely recommend downloading Field. That's FEELD. And now back to the episode.
I feel like a lot of lesbians or gays or just homosexual people don't think that bisexuality is queer enough.
Part of it, I think, is a little bit bit of transphobia too. It comes down to this idea of like what actually is a woman, which is what you're talking about, that you kind of have to unpack throughout all of this, because you're trying to protect this community, which in its first formation was like kind of a bit before like transness really in its full form entered into like society, if that makes sense. Like in the historic times of like bringing lesbian identities into more of a movement, if that makes sense. It was very like trans exclusionary, and like it's still, I think to this day is, with a lot of these like conservative lesbians, a lot of their talking points is kind of like, well, this is a space for women, and it's like I want to be able to connect with people who I resonate with, and it's kind of them saying that trans women are not women. If you are a trans woman who's a lesbian, you have to say you're a trans lesbian. Honestly, the more I dive into it, the more confused I am.
Yeah. I'm confused right now.
Because it's just it's so individual, and because it is very separated. Like when I first came into this, I was like, oh, the whole 2S LGBTQI plus, like we're all going to be in the same place.
All of us.
All
the pluses. Let's go. Not at all.
I was at an event the other, I think you were there too, the Rainbow Railroad, and I was talking with my colleague, and I was like, tell me about like gay male culture, because like I know nothing. Like we are so separated. I never see y'all. Like what do y'all get up to? I have no idea.
This realization of like noting that the community is so segregated too was like a huge part of our mission of wanting to like bring people on to like tell all of their different stories, because really the reason I think it is like people needing to stay in their little boxes, because they're like, oh, it feels so good to finally have people that I'm like resonating with and can understand. But like at the end of the day, it's just understanding how to interact with other people, understanding their experiences, and then how to be a better ally. And then it actually feels really nice to connect with other people who you have some degree of connection with, but it's like you're still learning and expanding.
Part of us living in Canada, in North America, in this capitalist system, like all of these systems are connected in terms of like the education system that we're brought up in, and how there's just a set structure of like, this is how everything is supposed to be. So people kind of lose their minds when there are no rules, when there's no structure, when there's no box. So it's like, even again, I think that goes back to the comp-het in relationships, is like there's supposed to be rules and standards in relationships, in friendships. And I feel like queerness goes against all of that, which is why people are like, even within queerness, are still trying to find rules to follow.
But kind of the whole point is that there's no rules.
Exactly.
Surrounding this whole discussion around comp-het, I'm wondering if you can elaborate on how race comes into play.
For me, I'm always a Black woman. Always. Like I'm genderqueer, but a Black woman. And I explain this in the journal as well, just in my little intro portion of explaining how that makes sense. Because I'm Black first and foremost. That's the first thing that someone's going to see, regardless. They see that I'm Black before I am femme, before I am anything else. So that is the lens that I'm constantly filtering through. So when it comes to comp-het, I think that's kind of why I was able to start deconstructing femininity in a way that was a little bit, I don't want to say easier, but it was almost forced, because I realized that I was trying to perform femininity in the traditional way, because that's how, you know, we are supposed to express ourselves as women, is to be feminine. And that version of femininity is white femininity, to be soft and pure and delicate. Like those are the things that are associated with whiteness. And that was something that no matter how hard I tried, it was never possible for me, especially being an athlete in high school. Like I was trying so hard to be feminine and it just was never giving. And I was always associated as more masculine, especially like being more muscular. It's like the guys would always point that out and make jokes and whatever. So I was trying so hard to not be masculine. I think that's what pushed me in my hyperfem era, because I was trying so hard to perform womanness. And I didn't understand at the time that that was directly related to whiteness. That with comp-het pushed me toward like the hyper masculine athlete men, because I was like, I need them to validate my femininity. And I think that's why I was in it for so long. You know, I didn't really find a lot of people that I could connect with, even online, to even realize that I could be queer, because even the YouTube videos that I would watch are people saying, I always knew I was different. And, you know, like ever since I was 5, I knew that I was queer, and I had a crush on like my best friend in elementary school. Like that just was not my experience. So I think that's why it took me a lot longer to figure it out.
A lot of labels, like they're made up, what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman. I'm not sure, like elements of race are a lot of things that we as society place on race, but the oppression faced from it is real and very much felt, you know? And like that's something that even if you're changing your own labels, you can't walk away from ever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you're someone of color, but especially if you're Black, especially if you're a Black woman, there's definitely a lot more pressure to be more polished, more perfect, because you have to work twice, 3 times, 5 times as hard as as the white woman to be that way and to be seen as this like feminine person that is desirable and attractive based on what white society has told us is desirable and attractive. You know what's wild though? Culturally, being the way that I present, which is like quite androgynous, not like super feminine, I'm aware that I present like either very masculine or just like you're not really sure what I am. And I'm Colombian, and there's times where maybe we'll go into a Colombian restaurant, or I know that wherever we are, somebody speaks Spanish there. But culturally, because I look the way that I do, I still hold some like cultural shame if you're raised in my culture. You're supposed to be very feminine. And because I'm not, sometimes I'll pretend that I don't speak Spanish and that I was actually, I'm like, what if I gave them the facade that I was actually like born and raised here? And like, maybe they'll believe it. So I start speaking in English, even though I can tell that they speak Spanish and that they have an accent and that they're like,
they would prefer if you spoke Spanish.
They would probably prefer if I spoke Spanish, and they're trying to like communicate with me, and I'm like, nope, I'm not going to give it away. If I give it away, then they'll know. Or
and then
like
you have to process the shame.
And then I have to process the shame. And in my head, I'm like, what do you think about me? Fuck. Like, I just don't want you to think anything about me. And I still experience that.
I thank you for sharing that, because that's something that I feel like we just don't talk about it, especially when you're surrounding yourself with other people of your same culture and your same experience. Everyone kind of understands that that's what we experience, and we just don't want to talk about it because it's like traumatic. It's great that we're talking about it now. I have a very different experience. I personally think it's a very privileged experience. I'm Haitian and Trini, and I've had other Haitians ask me like, what was your experience coming out to your parents? Like, I'm really scared to come out to my Haitian parents. There is such a heavy Catholic Christian influence on, I'm going to talk specifically about Haiti and Trinidad for all of the colonialist reasons that we don't need to get into a deep dive, but there's a reason why Catholicism was forced upon our people. And that also plays a part in, you know, the vehement homophobia and transphobia in our communities. But with my parents, for some reason, they didn't really push religion on my brother and I. Like, they were just kind of like, you'll go to Catholic school because that's what we did, but we don't really care. Like, do what you want for yourself, choose what you want for yourself. And I feel like that is a huge part of the reason why when I came out to them, there was not really much of an issue. They were just like, okay, I'm kind of confused. I don't really understand the terms, but like, whatever. Yeah. And even with my grandmother, like my 93-year-old Trinidadian grandmother, I told her that I'm queer, and she was just like, cool. Like, I think all of us are a little queer. Just some people just don't have the opportunity to really unpack it. And I was like, who are you? Because she is like very Catholic. So I don't know. I feel like when it comes to that culturally, I never really had that, you know, feeling of shame, because I understood that was a direct relation to how colonialism has impacted our cultures. I always had like a resentment, I still do, a resentment to like white Europeans and how they kind of like instilled this aspect of rigidity, and they created these hierarchies and these terms of like, man is this, woman is this, and like here are the racial hierarchies. And it's like, before that, we was all chilling, we were all fluid, you know what I mean? So if you go down to the root of it and go down like thousands and thousands of years, like, was there really this like rigidity of like everyone has to be heterosexual and this is like embedded in our culture and everyone has to be this or that? Like, I don't think so.
In the indigenous population of Colombia, no.
Exactly.
Which is like the case for pretty much every indigenous population of anywhere.
Literally, that's what I'm saying. Literally.
Moving on to this next section of the conversation, which I'm really excited for now that we've laid this groundwork. In what ways do you think comp-het does show up in queer relationships?
When we were talking about it earlier in terms of like hyper-masc lesbians who only date femmes, who feel as though they're the quote-unquote man of the relationship and they have all the masculine traits and they want femmes who are like strictly feminine. And I think those things show up a lot in queer relationships without us even really wanting to acknowledge that they're there. And it's just kind of, you know, falling into those traditional roles. Probably going to get in trouble for saying all these things, because there are people who it's like, if you want to do that, then okay. But if you feel like you have to because you present a certain way, that's when it's a little, it's giving heteronormative.
The fact that my experience was very similar to yours too. It's like when I first came out of the closet, I was like, I'm only dating masc. Like that's the only people I'm swiping on. Like I can't see myself like going and flirting with another very feminine feminine woman because it's like, that's what I am. And it just like wasn't computing in my head. And I'm like, how do I do this? Because I've only explored heteronormative relationships before that. And now that I've gotten a lot more confident in my own sexuality, like in my experience with women, I'm like, you know what? I'm actually very attracted to feminine women as well. And I'm like, I'm also attracted to androgyny. I'm also attracted to masculine people. I'm attracted to everything. And it doesn't have to be in these like neat little boxes.
When I first came out and started exploring sapphic relationships, I thought I had to dress very masculine. The undercut shade with like the bun on top, with like the really long ass shirt. It was too long. And even the way I walked was very like aggressive. I'm going to protect you. And now I'm like, can you protect me a little bit? Because I'm kind of scared.
Did you like run into any issues when you started dressing differently and not going the hyper mask route? Like in terms of people you were dating, were they like, I'm not into that? And you were just like, damn, okay, like this is what I was trying to avoid.
No, because I haven't dated a lot. But I would say no because I only started doing that while in this relationship.
Oh, okay.
And as the relationship has evolved and shifted, I mean, Emily has also been exploring the way that she dresses and your gender and everything.
To be fair though, like we did go through a phase. I think you got less masculine a few years into our relationship, but neither of us had fully like unpacked anything yet at that point. It did kind of like put into question like my sexual desires and these kinds of things. Like I started questioning that stuff for a minute there.
Oh, but you didn't tell me that.
No, we did. We had
did?
conversations about it.
Dang.
I remember.
I'm blanking.
But this was a while back and you had like gotten insecure about it on like all these different things. But your style had like slightly shifted and evolved. I think it was also like we started like sharing a lot of our clothes and like you stopped going to the gym quite as much and these things. And it's like it brought up some insecurities for you that like you didn't feel like you were that.
It did bring up insecurities. I was like, is this okay? Am I still like attractive?
The thing was, at that time, I had only dated masculine people and I'd only really found them attractive. I had to sit with it and question it for a bit. And then I'm like, you know what? This is the person who I really love. Like, they're my partner. I care so much about them. Actually, their physical form doesn't matter to me at all. And that was kind of like a huge unlock moment where I'm like, no one's physical form really matters to me that much. It's like, who's inside?
I asked that because like I had that experience and kind of like you were saying, I think that's what my ex was thinking in terms of like, this is different. And I don't know how I feel about it, but they were definitely like not nice about it. I started in my last relationship exploring my masculinity and I felt like for the first time I was giving myself permission to do that. And it was such a vulnerable thing to do too because I was just like, is this not my vibe? Do I look weird? Is this like, it's not giving? Like I'm trying to give STEM energy and it's just like not happening. But I felt so good when I was exploring just in the way that I was like dressing and stuff. And then my ex was just like straight up, like they were just like not into it and like just didn't think I looked good and more of a mask vibe. And that like destroyed me for a while. We broke up shortly after that. But it took me a while to like allow myself to get back there because again, for my whole life, I had been constantly put in this like, you're always going to be masculine because you're Black. And there's just an inherent masculinity associated with Blackness. So regardless of how feminine you want to look, it's never going to give. So I was trying so hard to be on the feminine side. So when I tried to actually sit in my masculinity, it was just like, I had been fighting against it for so long. So it was uncomfortable to do. So being with someone and evolving while you're with them and having them have a reaction to that isn't positive. I feel like a lot of people have had that experience and it's definitely tough. But yeah, like if you really love someone, their physical form really shouldn't matter and you should be like encouraging them to explore and to be as fluid as they want to be.
You mentioned that your partner is also exploring their gender expression and identity, right?
Yeah, I mean, they've been exploring forever. Like they've been out since 15. I feel like they have it figured out. Like they know exactly who they are. They're very much fluid and some days they'll give off more of a femi energy, some days more of a mask energy. But when you were to, if you to look at them, it's giving very much mask. Like you would never know that they're like a little princess. But that's what I love. It's just like there is so much duality in that. And when we first met, it was like my first ever queer experience. Like they snatched my queer virginity. So it was like my first everything. everything. Part of their journey was getting top surgery, but they didn't have it at the time. They were just kind of thinking about it. And they were like, well, what would you feel if I got top surgery? Like, how do you feel about that? And initially I was like, cool, like whatever. But I went home and I thought about it and I was like, well, especially because it was my first everything, right? So I was just like, I was still trying to figure out like, am I really a lesbian? Because my ex had just told me that I wasn't and I was just faking it because I was with them. So I was like, I was trying to affirm my like lesbianness, I guess. And that was directly correlated to being a woman, and having breasts and a vagina was, you know, what I learned was a woman. So I was like, if you don't have that, then what does that make me? Like, is that going to take away from my experience? Like, am I attracted to like feminine body parts? Like, is that what makes me a lesbian? It started that whole line of questioning. And I realized very quickly, like, okay, your body parts don't actually have anything to do with your gender or whatever. And like, it doesn't have anything to do with me. And, you know, we interacted, we fell off. And then when we reconnected, they had top surgery. So it was my first time kind of seeing them in person afterward. And I didn't feel as though anything was really different. I didn't know how I was going to react, but I was just like, oh, this feels like you've always looked like this. And now I'm like obsessed with their pecs because now they're in the gym, like getting a pump. And I'm just like literally so obsessed. And I realized like, okay, like I had disconnected physical body parts from gender. And I did that for myself as well. And that's when I started experimenting with Packers and trans tape, because I was just like, okay, like I hate that I feel like I'm a prisoner in my body and that my body communicates to people like who I am. So I was like, I want to be able to be in control of that. So it definitely inspired me in a lot of ways to just take ownership of my own body all over again.
Love that.
Another big piece I think that comes up in terms of like comp-het and queer relationships, big time questioning who's the man, who pays, and even like when we're getting into like the actual like bits and pieces of it, it's like who tops who. That was like a huge piece for me for a really long time, obviously like a huge chunk of our relationship. It's like who tops who. And that honestly is so limiting sexually, and it expands you so much to even just like explore different gender roles in the bedroom. And it's like, honestly, that's a very private place with someone who you really love. And that can actually be one of the nicest places to explore your gender for the first time, in like a safe environment where we're like, hey, can I try this out?
I'm so happy you brought this up. Oh my goodness. I 100% resonate. Oh, suffering as much as I did having sex with men and pretending that I was enjoying it. I think I just had never really understood how to receive, because my whole perception of sex and intimacy was through the lens of like, it is to please the man. So you're just kind of a vessel for them. When I was in my first sexual experience with my now partner, I was confused of like, what do we do? I don't understand. So they did their thing and I was like, okay, cool. Obviously I was in my head the whole time, but still was great. And because they are verse or switch, whatever you want to call it, I just thought I was going to have more time to prep, but they were just like, okay, like your turn, like let's see what you can do. And I was like, I'm not ready. Like I didn't think I was going to have to do this like right now. Like I thought I was going to have a few days to kind of, you know.
A few days. I thought I was going to like be able to like let it simmer and like
exactly
digest information and then come back to me.
No, that's exactly what I needed. But anyway, I was like, okay, this is my time to shine. I didn't realize how much I actually almost preferred being in a top position, because I had just never had the opportunity to do that ever. So I was like, oh, okay, like I actually enjoy being in this position. Like let me explore that further. And because they're verse, they allowed me to just literally do whatever I wanted and explore whatever I wanted. Then I realized that like I needed to learn how to receive and how to bottom. I never knew that that's what I was going to learn in a queer relationship. It's honestly recently, like within the last few months, I finally figured out and learned how to actually receive without having this expectation that I'm doing it for them or that I need to come quickly so that, you know, they're not bored down there or something. Like I had to really understand that they're doing it for me because they want to.
And that's like a huge reason, like before I started dating women, when I was just dating men, they never made me come. Like in all of those relationships, I was like, I was never able to orgasm. And it was because it was so programmed into my head that this sexual experience is actually for them. And it's like not about my enjoyment. It's about like it ends when they come. Also, it's like it feels like I'm taking up too much space sometimes. Like it, depending on like them giving me head or those kinds of things. But it would get to the point where it's like I was dating people who really loved me and they like really wanted to give me head, but I had like this like, no, please don't touch me there kind of a thing. It was like very strange. Now that that's gone, it is really interesting. I don't know. It really, I think it boils down to like a lack of comprehensive sex ed and a lack of like queer sex ed that all of us are receiving that is actually so limiting to all of our sex life, even if you are a cisgendered straight person. It's limiting your ability to have pleasure.
I hear this a lot with bisexual women that have either only been previously in relationships with men men, or maybe they're newly discovered lesbian who had only previously been in relationships with men. And I do think that it is like, unfortunately, a running joke that when they start having sex with women, they're like, oh my God, I came 7 times, or like more than I ever have before. But I think that unfortunately, because of comp-het and all these norms and the whole thing about like sex is for men and it's for their pleasure and it ends when they end, a lot of people don't get to experience what it means to have pleasure, you know, for them.
It is very sad. And I didn't know that I was part of that group because I really became the best actress in the world for myself. Like I would put on this performance for them, but it was really just to convince myself that I was coming. And I was pretty good at it because I was like, it's a mental thing. Like if I believe that I did, then like I think I did. I was convincing myself that I was having like the best sex ever when really that was never the case until obviously I was having my first queer experiences. And I was kind of telling people off jump, I was like, I just don't really like head. Like, you don't have to go down on me. Like, it's just not really my cup of tea. But I just didn't realize that no one had ever really taken the time to learn my body and like just be patient with me.
Yeah. And get curious.
And be curious. Yeah.
My first queer relationship, and this was like the first time I like really had like a actual orgasm that I could clock, like 100%. It was when I was like, oh, like I'm good. Like I did like kind of like one of those like, I think I faked it orgasms because I was like, I think this is going on for too long. And then she was like, I'm not done yet. And I'm like, well, it's for you. And then that's when I actually relaxed and I was like, oh, you're for sure confirmed enjoying yourself because I told you can stop. And you know what I mean? And
Confirmed.
that's when then I came like fucking 15 times in a row and I was like, okay, wow, that's what a lot of people just need is like this actual like genuine confirmation that the other person is enjoying themselves, you know?
Yes. For me, that was the key. Because the men that I was interacting with communicated to me that they didn't enjoy it and they would do it for like literally 5 minutes and like just it seemed like it was more of a chore and a task.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I have like 2 minutes to like come because then they're going to be done. When there's that affirmation that they are genuinely enjoying themselves, even if it's not verbal, but you can just see that like, okay, you're having your own experience.
Yeah.
Now I can just like get out of my head and just like be instead of being like, okay, it's been like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, you know?
Yeah.
Talking about the other side of this too is like kind of the men's side is like them not actually enjoying giving head. I'm like, how much of this is like comp-het for them? I'm like, do you actually really like women? Because a lot of these podcasts that like come up with like these super like masculine men, it's like the trad wife, traditional kind of like content creators. I'm like, none of y'all sound like you actually like women.
Okay, so in my head, I could be totally wrong. But if you are a traditional man who does not like going down on a woman, but you like having sex with women, I think you just like orgasms. And I don't know if you actually like women.
You can really tell the men who do like women because they do like going down on women. You know what I'm saying? And like as a bisexual person, I'm like, I love going down on women. Like it's an enjoyable task.
Of course.
Across the board. It's something enjoyable to do. That's why I'm actually really questioning. I'm like, they would never admit this, but like, I mean, a lot of the times the biggest like homophobes
Are the biggest homos?
Are the biggest homos.
I struggle with it because like some of them are just like straight up homophobic people. But yeah, some of them like they just have never really had the opportunity to explore anything outside of being a straight man, because the worst thing to a straight man is exhibiting any kind of femininity. And it's just misogyny at the end of the day. Like being attracted to men as a man is seen as feminine, and that makes you lesser and all of those things.
Societal expectations and like having to conform to them make people angry. And honestly, I really do think some of the biggest victims of patriarchy is men. It's like, honestly, like it doesn't feel good to hold in your emotions. It doesn't feel good to like have all of this expectations that you have to be the breadwinner and like you have to have all that stress and pressure on yourself.
And be a leader and have it all figured out.
I mean, like there's a reason that a lot of like crimes and like really negative attributes are related to men. And like there's this whole like loneliness epidemic and all of these like negative things happening. It's like this pressure and expectation isn't healthy. It isn't good. And I think kind of that can boil into some from resentment. It's like you feel like you have to do these certain things for your partner who's this trad wife woman. And it's like, because I did X, Y, and Z, I've made all of these sacrifices for you. You have to be my sexual object. You have to be my maid. You have to be all of these things. And it leads into all of this misogyny, which I think is just like, honestly, overall very toxic. One piece that we miss is like a lot of this like comp-het discussion really came from like the lesbian manifesto document that was on Tumblr a long time ago. But it's interesting, like it hasn't been as unpacked for men.
Yeah, absolutely. And I found that with the lesbian master doc as well, because that's how I discovered all this.
Yep.
I forgot to say, like, I found the lesbian master doc, and then everything just was like, you know, the floodgates kind of opened. But I found that it was limiting in the sense that it was for women and AFAB people. And that's why in the journal, like, I included 2 separate sections, one for people who are socialized as women and one for people socialized as men. Because, like, generally speaking, we're, you know, kind of put into one of those 2 boxes, and then we kind of have to work backwards from there. It's unfortunate that patriarchy and misogyny affects men so much, and like they're trying so hard to uphold it, but it's like it's harming you too. We were talking about like men and, you know, not knowing if they're really attracted to women. I know that there's like controversy in that because people are like, well, you can't just say that like these misogynistic and homophobic men are just gay, because like that's not always the case. I think it really just is misogyny and this phobia of anything considered remotely feminine, and even the act of like pleasuring a woman. I think there's a level of softness that has to be associated with that, and they're just like, I'm hard, like there's nothing soft about me. And I think that's what plays into it also. And it's just
Midwest,
like
too.
no, always
Yeah.
only always.
Yeah, there must be the accent. Yeah,
But like I think that's really what it is. It's just like this deep hatred of women that they've been passed down from gender. Like they are taught that.
Because they got to go brag to their homies too about how like they tore the pussy up or like whatever, rather than like
it's aggressive.
Yeah,
also,
it's so aggressive. But you never hear like, I pleased her for 5 hours straight and she didn't touch me at all, and she was in awe of how much I gave to her. Like never that. It was like, fucked her. Hard.
Well, I think this is why like having your first queer experience like as a woman or an AFAB person can be so mind-opening, because it's like, wow, finally I'm with someone else who is like celebrating women, because it's like it didn't feel like it was something that's celebrated. And I feel like beside misogyny, it's also like an internalized homophobia too, because it's like this level of femininity can also be attributed to like gayness and like gay men as well. And like that's something in terms of like self-preservation. You're seeing gay men be like some of like the most bullied people all throughout elementary and high school. It's like if a man or an AMAB person is showing any degree of like feminine mannerisms, they are being targeted and bullied like to a crazy degree. I think that's where it really comes down to, is like both internalized homophobia, self-preservation with it, and then misogyny too. The next piece that I really wanted to explore is queering our own relationships. I'm wondering, in your opinion, what does it mean to queer your relationship?
It means there's no rules and there's no boxes as much as possible, and allowing there to be some grace when one or both people are kind of veering into the direction of going back into some of that comp-het, because it is so ingrained.
How do you think that non-queer people, the heterosexuals out there, can queer their own relationships?
Change everything. No, I'm just kidding.
Dismantle your entire relationship.
Get the Gender and Sexuality Journal, available at thegendersexualityjournal.com. But no, for real though, it's like, just because you are straight doesn't mean that you shouldn't unpack all the things that we've talked about today. Figure out what your femininity, what your womanhood means to you. Figure out what your manhood, your masculinity, all of that means to you, and what you feel you can bring to the relationship. Like, figure out if the roles that you have currently are what you actually want to do, or if you feel like because of your gender and position that that's what you have to do. It doesn't matter what your sexuality is. I think we should all be questioning everything all the time. And I feel like there's like this inherent rigidity with straightness that I feel like shouldn't even be there. I feel like even with being heterosexual, things should still be fluid. I'm trying my hardest to like unlearn my, I don't know what it is, like not resentment, resentment towards straight people. Whenever I hear straight, I'm like, boring. And I'm like, I don't want to think that way, because I'm like, straight people can be cool, but I just associate that with like rigidity. And I'm like, that's just not my energy, but it doesn't have to be like that.
Yeah.
Y'all can be cool.
Yeah, straight people can be cool.
For me, it kind of, what you're saying, it boils down to like queer joy. So one thing I have finally tapped into, and it's been after I've unlearned all of this like comp-het and like gender roles and all of these pieces, is like now I've finally found confidence in like who I am beyond all of these expectations. It's like, okay, I'm actually doing all of these things for me and none of it is for somebody else. And that kind of came down to it, just like exploring into things that I want to explore into and like trying things on and seeing if it's right for me. But that to me and like to us is like what queer joy means. It's kind of this like sense of liberation where it's like, whoa, all of these expectations are gone off of my back and it feels really, really good. And one thing we realize like in terms of like allyship and like even like your own self-exploration is like anyone can tap into queer joy because everybody is impacted by these social expectations, no matter what your sexuality or your gender is. Kind of unpack for yourself why you're making these choices, like why you're putting this shirt on, why you're dressing in this specific way, who you're interacting with, your mannerisms, all of these things. Have you limited yourself in any way? And like the reality is, in my opinion, I think everyone can learn something from the queer community. Having complete free expression is so liberating, freeing, and beautiful. And like potentially along the way, you might actually find yourself identifying as queer once you start unpacking all of these things for yourself and realizing what is actually being done for yourself and like what you're doing for other people.
It's the gay agenda.
Literally, that's what it is.
Just like,
literally,
don't be boring.
Don't be boring.
Yeah.
Is that too much?
Period.
Do we have anything exciting that you would like to plug for our audience? And where can folks connect with you?
It's the journal.
Do you want to bring it out and like show it to that camera?
Yeah, there's a website, thegendersexualityjournal.com, and you can kind of just explore all of the different facets of it. And then on my TikTok at tblizzy and my Instagram, Tyra Blizz, I work with In Magazine, which is Canada's leading 2S LGBTQI+ digital publication website and community platform. And we just recently signed on Queer Collective as one of our community partners. So we're just amplifying all of your initiatives on our socials and editorials. So this is just kind of a call out to other nonprofit orgs in the GTA, and not even just in the GTA, for whoever is listening within Canada, reach out so that we can start amplifying what you have going on, because there's so many services for us. The issue is just if we don't know it's there, we're not going to know where to go. And that was my issue when I first came out. So that's what we're doing with InMag. So call out to other nonprofit orgs if you want some visibility in the magazine.
So thank you so much, Tyra, for joining us today. And if you want to get the Gender and Sexuality Journal for a place to start, that'll be the first link in the description down below. And if you want to dive deeper into the topic of queer late bloomers, make sure to click the video on the left or in the description down below. Make sure that you like the video and subscribe. And if you have any burning thoughts, make sure to leave them in the comments down below. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast app, make sure to leave us a 5-star review because it really does help the podcast out. That's everything that we got. And until next time, peace.